I'm going to show you how to install Learning Registry Node software on Ubuntu 12.4 long-term support. Um, I'm going to start with a uh, base install of the system that has already been updated and upgraded once after the installation. And I've also installed the OpenSSH server so we can connect to it and use some copy and paste uh, remotely. I am doing this within VMware Fusion, but any virtual machine or Amazon instance or real hardware should be identical. All right, so let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is since I like to SSH into the virtual machine, I'm going to go get the IP address from that. So I can do that. So we've got that. I will now SSH into that. If you'll notice, I've added this port forwarding. We'll use this later in the video. Basically, part of the install installs CouchDB, which runs on localhost, so we can get to the administration interfaces, which run on port 5984 by default. We're just going to port forward locally, so we can use our local computer browser to get to it. Yep, we'll try this again. There we go. Third time's the charm. Okay. So to start with, I'm already a user. The user that's been created with the install has sudo privileges. So we're going to start by installing a bunch of system dependencies so we can get CouchDB installed as well as the Learning Registry software. Right, so here we go. Okay, now that all the system dependencies have been installed, we can continue on to actually building CouchDB on Ubuntu, and also uh, install the Learning Registry Node software. To begin with, let's start making a couple users, one for CouchDB and one for Learning Registry. We'll start here. For my purposes here, I'm just using password as the password, but obviously for you, pick something more secure. Since this is a demonstration, this makes it worthwhile. Okay, now that we have two new users that we've created, one called CouchDB, the other one called LearnReg, we can now move forward onto building CouchDB. So we'll start with creating a destination for Couch. So to do that, we're going to do First make a directory for it. Because this kind of doesn't fall into a packaging scenario, I like to install them in opt. But you can choose user local if you like, or really any location you want on the system. Okay, so then we'll, since these are going to be run, Couch will run as its own user. We want to make sure that's owned by that user. Now let's change users to the Couch user we just created. And one thing to remember if you're using SU to switch, to include this minus sign. It makes sure that you get a login console for the CouchDB user. It doesn't get some things confused with the user you logged in as. So next we're going to build Couch. We're going to use my own personal build copy of this because the current recent versions of the script are broken, and so I've maintained a version that's actually works for our purposes. But feel free for other installations, you can use the master, the original version from provided by Iris Couch. Okay. Now we can move forward on building Couch. So we will first change directory into that, and because it depends on some other things, we're going to initialize those submodules and update it and get the latest source for those things too. This sometimes takes a little bit of time. All right, now that we've done our updated all the submodules for CouchDB from Git, we can now actually run the build script. And I'll kind of digest down what's going on here with this build script. So we're installing CouchDB into this directory, CouchDB 1.20, under opt. I'm grabbing the 1.20 release from Couch, and there's a couple plugins that we've been started to use. Browser ID for Couch, which is Mozilla's Persona identity provider interface, and another one that we're not quite using yet, but we've been toying with doing some indexing with, is GeoCouch, which adds a geospatial index plugin into Couch as well. We're not yet using this in the Learning Registry code, but may use it in the future. So rather than having to go through this trouble of rebuilding the plugin, we'll do it right now. It'll just go unused until then. All right, so hit enter and off to the races. This takes a long time. I'm not going to video this whole thing run through. I'll pause. It can, depending on the machine, it can take anywhere from a half hour to 45 minutes to build. Okay, now that Couch is done building and the plugins are built, we need to configure Couch. So to start off, let's change directory to the location that we had Couch build at. And then let's link the our new install to a common location. This is doing this mostly so to facilitate upgrades in the future if they're necessary. Um, so you can build the upgraded version alongside of it without affecting um, the existing install. Oops. There we go. If you remember, we're able to do this because we changed the ownership of this directory when we first created it to CouchDB. So now let's cd into this directory, and we're going to edit this file envch. In here we need to add the configuration for the extra plugins um, that we installed or built alongside this. So we can do that by adding this path. So it's we're going to export this variable URL flags. There's a couple ones you can use. I suggest using URL flags equals as a quoted string dash PA and then a space and then a path to the ebin directory of each of the plugins. So this is where our GeoCouch plugin got built and installed, and likewise the browser ID plugin as well. So we can save that, and then we have another the next file to edit. We're going to basically do the same exact line inside the CouchDB init script. So let's see, D, and I generally put it after, oops, sorry, this LSB library. And that just gets it so when we start up, when you run this init script, it knows where to find those extra plugins. And then next, we're going to go in and we're going to add a password into the couch, the default password. So that's in the CouchDB local INI. I believe this is all the way at the bottom. As you can see, it's already there. A password is there. I'm just going to do the same thing, but I'm going to just set my password right now to just password. when Couch starts up the first time, it'll read this and it'll hash that password so it's no longer plain text. So no worries. Write and save that. Now we should be able to try to start up Couch if we've done everything correctly. So opt CouchDB current because we symlinked it to there. Etsy init start. Oops, init CouchDB start. And if we did everything right, we should be able to curl host. Right. And you see now we have CouchDB is running on port 5984. Now we could actually, if you remember when we could stat at the very beginning when we started installing, let's see if my buffer goes back that far, we did set up some port forwarding. No, it doesn't. When we did this SSH connection to our local host. So I can go here now in my web browser and say 9001, I believe I had, and go utils, and this is CouchDB Futon. And by default, it's only going to have two databases, a users, and a replicator. But we can see now that it's up and running, and it seems to work. We should also be able to. You should also see a login area here. Down on the lower left. If it says admin party, it means that you didn't set a password. No worries. You can stop Couch using just following the same command with a stop instead of start, and edit that INI file as well there. Again, set the password and restart, and you should see this. There's some other ways to do it. You could do it from within the CouchDB configuration screens as well, or there's probably some instructions here to turn off admin party as well when it shows up. I'll leave it to you to follow those instructions if you run into that case, into that scenario. So we should also, while we're at it, check that we can actually also connect to Couch using our authentication as well. Couch uses basic authentication by default. So admin password at localhost 984, and it works. So we're good to go. We can also check to see that we're getting the right session. And there we go. We see name admin at enrolls admin. It shows you some basic information about this admin user. So let's we'll stop Couch right now. And now we're going to configure it so we're going to configure Couch so we can start it with our standard Ubuntu and Linux service command. So we want to exit the Couch shell user because we had SU'd to that, and we're gonna, because we need super user to do this, so we're gonna add some symbolic links in to link some of the files in. So here's the start stop script that we just used, and we're gonna link it to the Etsy initd couchdb location. And next, we're also going to do, because couch logs can get rather large, I want to also um, link set up the log rotate D as well. Now, to add couch TV so it can be recognized by service, we need to run the update rcd command. That gives us that. Now we should be able to sudo service couchdb start, and everything is fine. We should be able to now do that curl again, http localhost 5984, and get a welcome. So now we're good to go on getting couch. I'll take a break and we'll come right back. Okay, so now we're resuming where we left off. We're going to continue on. Next step, before we actually download all of the Learning Registry software, we're going to generate a GPG key for our for publishing and signing messages using the new node signing implementation. If you have an existing GPG key, you're free to use that. Just follow the GPG instructions. Assuming since you've already have one, you know how to import the key into your keyring. You're going to want to import that key into the Learn Reg users, or whatever user you created to run the Learning Registry code, that user's keyring. So let's start off. I'm already logged in as myself, who is a super user. So the first thing I'm going to do is change users to the Learning Reg. And now I'm going to start off by generating a new GPG key. So you only really need the DSA or RSA sign only for this, as we're not really doing any cryptography with Learning Registry, but you could choose, if you have a multi-purpose key, or want to create a multi-purpose key for other purposes besides just Learning Registry, feel free to create any one of those keys. I'm going to choose a option 3 as a DSA sign only key, and I'm going to just accept the defaults. I'm not going to expire for the most part. I'm going to leave it as is. We'll call this, since we're creating this key for the node, for this demo node, I'm just going to call it Learning Registry Demo node. And I can just use my email address. Oops, what did I do wrong? Well, obviously the instructions are wrong, so we're going to use LR demo node email. That's what's going on. Comment. There we go, and we are okay. Enter passphrase. You should set a passphrase for this. That's will be secret. It'll be used during the configuration process of the node. I'm just gonna use secret stuff as my passphrase right now. And then we run into this problem every so often. I'm going to pause this while I generate some more entropy for this key, and we'll resume in a moment once the command has come back. Thought I'd pick up real quick before I got to the next step and show you a little bit how to add more randomness, or at least monitor if you're doing or getting randomness in your key. One thing you could do is I've got in my on the server itself, I can cat dev random, and it'll start as I move my mouse around and all that kind of stuff. You can see that it's generating some garbage. Once garbage characters and randomness. And I do this enough, it'll eventually fill up the buffer, and we'll see over on the other screen that we actually get enough entropy to generate a key. This is really common to happen when you're doing this on a virtual machine like VMware or VirtualBox and such. Okay, so after quite a bit of time, we were able to generate enough randomness. It took me about 5-10 minutes to get there. But as you can see, it completed and created our keyring trusted DB created, and it was signed and marked. And so here's our key. We want to keep track of that. Probably for us, we want to make sure we get the full fingerprint, and to do that, I'm just going to do list the secret keys. So there we have the full fingerprint and have everything. So from here, we need, we want to keep track of these last 16 characters, I believe. So from here on, that part of the fingerprint is what we will use for our key ID. I'm going to copy that and save it in a notepad. And aside while I wait when I get to the next step, because I'll need that when configuring the node. So now that we've got that, the next step is to we'll start checking out the Learning Registry code and getting in, configuring it, setting up the virtual environment, and configuring Learning Registry, and then ultimately starting it. So we're already here logged in with the LearnReg user. So the thing we're going to do now is clone the Learning Registry software from GitHub. So git clone, git github.com/learning registry/learning registry. Okay, now that our code is all checked out, uh, next thing we're going to do is create the Python virtual environment. We should already have virtual env installed. Uh, so its command will be virtual env, and then we don't want any site packages, and no site packages. And we want to make sure we use Python 2.7, so Python 2.7, and then we'll give the environment a name. I'm just going to call it env, and that should get it going. Now we want to activate this, so it's you hit you want to source the file. So to do that in bash shell, you use a dot or period, and then env bin activate, enter, and you'll know that this is active because your prompt will be modified to include the name of the virtual environment. So the first thing we want to do is install UWSGI. So pip install UWSGI. And it'll take a few moments. So now that that's done, we will now go on and install the Learning Registry software. So it's follows the same idea, but pip install -e, which is important, and then Learning Registry LR. So it's the directory. It's located within what we checked out from GitHub. So we hit enter, and this might take a bit of time. It's going to download lots of dependencies, and some of them require compilation. Some of them are pure Python. So this could take a very short amount of time. This could take quite a bit of time. I'll pause the video here, and we'll pick up once it's complete. Okay, now that this Learning Registry has downloaded and installed all its packages it needed to run the Learning Registry services, we need to configure our node to do that, to work as its own standalone node. So to do that, we need to run the configuration script. Within the checked out directory of Learning Registry, there's a config directory. We're going to change directory there, and then we're going to be sure we explicitly specify Python, and then run the setup node script. And it will try its hardest to figure out as much as it can from the way your system is already configured. So if you have the host name configured and such, it'll try to determine names for the defaults If they're different, if the actuals are different, feel free to change them. Uh, I'm just going to use lrdemo.local since I don't have a real DNS. I'm just going to hard code it so I can demo it for you. And that is the default is correct for me. And note here, this is asking for the authenticated CouchDB database administrator URL. This can actually be any user that has administrative privileges. Doesn't have to be the admin user. You can create multiple in Couch. But since I set my password to password, I can accept the default, which is where the username is admin and the password is password. Enter node name. This is the name you want others to know your node as. So I don't like the default, so I'm going to demo node and node description used for teaching how and currently I'm not going to set up any distribution, any nodes to distribute to. You can add that later. Isn't anything you have to do at configuration. This node is not going to be a gateway, so and it's going to be open as well. This next bit is mostly for people who are upgrading from previous versions, except the default of incoming. For the most part, for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to enable all services. So I'm going to pretty much accept the defaults for everything. Then I'll pause for a moment where I need to actually enter things such as that PGP identifier and passphrase. This value here. If you don't know a value to put in, accept the default. Currently, it's the current software doesn't honor this value, but it is planned to be used at a later date. So the default value is probably sufficient at this time to just accept. So here's where we need that private key ID. And look, it found it. It knows that we created it as LR demo node and with my email address on there. So I'm going to leave the signer on there just as that. I don't need to change it. And then the passphrase for this is secret stuff, I believe. And it pretty much got everything's set up for us. Now it's going to ask a couple questions on how to configure uh, Nginx, which is the web server, which we'll be doing next, but it's going to build a configuration file for us to simplify the setup of that. So this is where I'm going to put the standard location for Nginx log. So we'll accept the default, and that should be it. And for that, so in the directory, this directory, you'll notice that there is a should be a learningregistry.conf file. We'll be using that for configuring Nginx next. So to do that, we're going to now we're going to exit this shell, and because we're going to need to use sudo privileges, and we are going to first remove the existing default site site that's enabled in Nginx. And then now we're going to grab that file that we just created and copy it into this sites available directory. Next, and this is all convention for Nginx, where you put configurations in one directory and then symbolically link active configurations in another directory. So now we're going to create the symbolic link from that sites available directory into the sites enabled directory. And that configuration has a couple things that it depends on. That we've written to customize the logging and variables that are captured. So we're going to copy those from the code that we checked out and copy them into the Nginx conf D folder. And I'm going to do basically the same thing with some other things as well. Now at this point we should be able to start Nginx for the first time. It might already be running, so we'll use restart. And it worked. And we can verify that it's working by going to the IP address of the server. And it should just say bad gateway because the Learning Registry isn't quite running yet. But we have our web server running. So now we're going to switch back to our Learning Registry user and make sure that the service starts up. At least starts up for the first time. So sudo shoot and we got to reactivate our virtual environment because we exited that shell earlier. And now the way to start this, start Learning Registry is to uwgi --ili paste Learning Registry H. So now this should have gotten us to the point where Learning Registry is actually running uh, right now from the command line. Um, we should be able to go back to our browser and hit refresh, and we get basically the node's home page. If we wanted to check some of the services, we can start, hit status, gives us some information about the node and what data it is, and the earliest date stamp and stuff. So this is empty, so there's no date stamp yet, and there's no docs. Oops. We'll hit services. This should list all the services that we just set up. Destination. Destination. Obtain. Key. So we can see now that our node right now seems to be fairly functional. So now the next step is to configure. We're going to configure Learning Registry as a service. I'm going to take a quick break and we'll come right back to that. Okay, with the magic of movies, we are back in an instant after that pause. And so what we're going to do now is set up Learning Registry as a service. And so it runs just like we start and stop couch DB with the service command and any other service running under Linux. We can register Learning Registry to do the same thing. So to start to do that, we're going to first stop the running Learning Registry service that we started a little bit ago, and we do that by going back to the console where we started it up and hit Control C. That'll look like there's a bunch of errors, but there's no real error happening. You'll say goodbye to UWSGI, so we know that Learning Registry is dead. And then we're going to go back to that configuration directory, home, registry, config. And there's another script there called service util. We're going to run it very similar to the way we did the other. Util. And it's going to ask you where the base learning directory is, and that's correct. Your var directory, so it knows where you're going to put the logs and stuff. So that's typically this is typically correct for most people. So unless you're wanting to install in like user local var, var is typically the correct place for most people. And then the user that Learning Reg will run as, which is the current user. Same thing with the group. And that should have configured that the start script. If we, you'll see there is learning registry.sh. So we're now going to exit this. And now we're going to copy that file using our super user powers into the Etsy init directory. And because it needs to be executable, we're going to make that executable. And like in the other instances where we we registered the service script, start stop script with update RCD. We do that here as well. And now we can start the Learning Registry service. And if we go to one of these files, we should see oops. Oh, I don't have permissions. We need to sudo that. So you can see it started, and we're in good shape. The next one last thing that we're going to do is, because the Learning Registry log also has a tendency to grow, and we want to be able to rotate those logs. We're going to set up log rotate as well. We have that already pre-configured for you. So we're going to grab it from this directory and copy it in the log rotate D. If you want to check what's there, it's okay, because if you use different settings than what we showed here, you might want to make sure that the directories are all correct, such as you can see the UWSGI and all these other files that are here. So I don't have anything to change, so everything should work fine for us. So anyways, that's your Learning Registry Node should be up and running at this point. You should be able to go back over here, hit refresh. It's all running. And this is the end, concludes this tutorial. Thanks for watching.